Thanks, Tim. Hi everyone, I'm Victoria, I'm an addict. Suddenly very hot and feeling quite sweaty and my heart is going like this, and I really don't like sharing. I don't feel very comfortable here, I feel very exposed, but I thank you for asking me, because it is, it's part of my 12-step and it is important that I do these things and I say yes to them. So I just feel like I want to apologise in advance. I'm not sure what drivel is going to come out tonight. I'm extremely tired. An example of that today at work, I answered the phone and just went down the phone. Unfortunately, it was someone who I have a good relationship with, who just started giggling at that response, because I've just completely forgotten what my name was and where I was. That should hopefully have lowered your expectations somewhat. It's really mad. I'm sort of sitting here thinking, like, where do I begin? What do I get so kind of overwhelmed sometimes, and I'm thinking about, my journey, and I do, when I have a show, I do try to sort of reflect on things somewhat, and it's just really mad to think about the person I was before I found this way of life, because it just feels so alien to me now, and it feels like, not just because of like kind of the passage of time, but just because it's, the life I lived was just so far away from the life I have today, and it's like, and it makes me feel quite overwhelmed with, gratitude and just happiness, which I can forget at times, but, and it is absolutely thanks to this programme, so if you're new or if you're struggling and you're here, we have something really, really amazing on offer that's free, and it does require some effort, but it can just change everything. That's what it did for me. It just changed everything. I was kind of thinking about the person I was when I was in active addiction and drinking and using, and and just kind of the life I lived and who I was inside. And it was, I was just always like, flying between these two, these extremes of, extremes emotions, extreme ways of thinking. I was either just like on this sort of hedonistic, crazy kind of like, fuck everything, I'm just going to like, I don't know what, live this life, tell myself that I'm living this life that's fun and that's adventurous, and it wasn't. It was just drug-fueled and, and at times, ridiculous. And but even that was just so far from the reality of what I actually, was doing. I was just always driven by this compulsion to change the way that I felt, because deep inside, I just, I'd flip between feeling like, I'm on top of the world when I've got drugs and alcohol in me, to just like, I want to kill myself. I can't exist. I don't know how to function. I hate who I am. I hate everything about myself and about my life, and, just always living in one of these camps. And it was just, so exhausting. And I had no concept of, what even, addiction was. Not for me anyway, because it was, I wasn't an addict. I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't have a problem. I had problems, and they were created by other people. I had a few issues, but again, that was because of other people. It was for the things that they had done to me. I was very much a victim of, what I felt was other people, because of other people. So I could never take any responsibility for myself, and it was very obvious to others that, the circumstances that I ended up in were very much of my own creation, but it was a lot easier to point the finger at, other people and other things and other stuff, and, it was, so I certainly didn't see myself as an addict. An addict was like, the characters in Trainspotting. An alcoholic was the old man in the park, like, that wasn't me, although, it wasn't far off, certainly not towards the end, and I kind of, I started drinking and using, relatively young. I honestly can't remember the first time I tried alcohol, because I was a young child. My parents would sort of give me a little like shop, would have Sunday lunch. I came from, a nice, loving, quite relatively stable family. and they would like give me a little bit of wine and like a shot glass and top it up with some lemonade. And I think, you know, they thought they were being quite continental in introducing, you know, their children to alcohol at a really young age. And I'm not sure whether that's something I would repeat myself now, but, you know, they did the best of what they knew. And, you know, but I remember sort of looking at their liquor cabinet, and it just sounded nice and it smelt nice. And I remember the labels on the bottles, and like, you know, and my parents aren't alcoholics. Like, there is alcoholism and, you know, addiction in my family, but my parents weren't. You know, they would like open the cabinet at Christmas or, you know, on a birthday, and occasionally have a cocktail, and that would be it, you know, and they would like drink that very slowly, and then it would, you know, the cabinet would be shut, and that was it for another 6 months. That was the kind of drinkers they were, you know. But I just remember being really drawn and fascinated by it still. And I think, you know, there was an occasion where. Well, there were a few occasions, you know, I used to sort of break into it when they weren't looking. Me and my sister would go in and, you know, and drink from it, basically, and it would taste horrible, and it would be very warm and like go straight to our heads, and we'd be like, oh, it's disgusting. But then we'd go, yeah, let's have some more, you know. And then I think one day I got hold of the Baileys and just like drank like nearly an entire bottle of Baileys, and then, you know, it was really sick because I was about 12, and my mum kind of coming into my bedroom with me holding the bottle like the Baileys, just looking at me like, why are you drinking the Baileys? You know, you're 12, just like, what are you doing, kind of thing. And I had absolutely no explanation, you know. There was no thought you know, at some point in that evening, the thought process was go and have some Baileys, you know, whilst your mum's getting ready for bed. You know, that would be a good idea. There was, and then afterwards, it was just like, I have no idea, but I don't feel very well now, you know. And then, you know, it kind of, you know, I think I more consciously took off with this stuff, you know, when I was in my early teens, you know, and I was experimenting with drugs, and, you know, I'd smoke weed with my friends and drink with them, you know, and, but I started experimenting with inhaling deodorant. My friends weren't doing that, but I used to inhale deodorant through, you know, for a cushion in my bedroom. And, because I you know, there was an effect produced, and I liked it, and then I couldn't stop doing it. And it was like, you know, even then it just never, there was never any kind of like, why do I keep doing that? I remember my mum again going like, you're going through deodorant quite quickly, like, are you all right, kind of thing. You know, and I used to kind of always do things to excess, you know, even from a young age. I was always the one that was like, starting fights, or, you know, having to be kind of, you know, my parents having to be called because I've got really out of control and really out of hand, and I'm trying to fight everyone, and can they come and get me, please? And like, you know, that was all just, yeah, it was just always really messy and chaotic. And, you know, I remember when I went to university, I just remember thinking, brilliant, this is great, I'm away from my mum and dad, I've kind, you know, I'm kind of like, I can do whatever I like here, and there's no responsibility. And I used to call it holiday camp, you know. That's how I used to think it was just like a holiday camp for 3 years where I can just party and do whatever I like. And I pretty much did, you know. For a while, it was fun. It was, you know, it was fun. I can't deny that, you know. If it had been really, really miserable from the beginning, I don't think I would have pursued it. You know, did I know at that point where it would lead? Absolutely not. You know, would I have wanted to stop if someone had warned me? You know, probably not. Because underneath all of that, you know, I wasn't a happy and content person. You know, I tried to kill myself when I was 17. You know, the happy and content 17-year-old doesn't try to do that kind of thing. You know, there were some serious issues there from, you know, a young age. And, you know, rather than look at those things, you know, it was much easier to find my solution, you know, in drugs and alcohol, you know, or you know, boys or girls or money or anything, you know, anything that could take me away from me, you know, because I just could never sit with myself. You know, I just had this head that was just constantly on me, and I had no awareness of that. You know, that was just my norm. That was normal to me. It wasn't until I was, you know, probably about 9 months clean, and I think I'd just about finished my steps, and I just remember like coming out of work one day and being like, the noise had just, the volume had just gone down. Like, the noise was just, it wasn't there anymore. And I had this real moment of like, I'm really mundane place, just standing like, you know, walking to my car, and having this sudden realisation that like everything's quiet, and I'd realised like that my head had just finally gone quiet, and I'd become aware of that, and I was like, oh, this is nice. You know, because prior to that I'd just never known anything but, you know, this constant noise, constant thoughts, you know, never had any moments of peace. You know, I knew what the word meant on an intellectual level, but I'd never experienced it. And, you know, my drinking and using just kind of, it was fun, and then it just got dark. At some point, it just began to get really dark. You know, the consequences began to kind of mount up. You know, my relationships were falling apart. The people I was, you know, people who were sort of more stable influences in my life, my friendships, they were just beginning to drift from me because they didn't want to, you know, they just didn't want to be around me anymore. So, you know, I'm gravitating towards more and more chaotic people like me, you know, because that's, you know, kind of that was the pattern I always followed. You know, the relationship I was in was breaking down and it fell apart. You know, I was just, everything was just getting really, really messy. And, you know, and at some point it just kind of, I don't know, it really did feel quite sudden. It just suddenly sort of just dropped off a cliff. And I've gone from being this kind of, you know, party girl to this person that has to, you know, that's having to leave work to go and use because I'm in withdrawal, and, you know, and I feel like I'm literally crawling up the road to go and use, to then get back to work, to carry on with the rest of my day. And then I'm like having to crawl back when work's over, you know, literally just holding on, like, before I can use again, you know, and not understanding or seeing that any of that wasn't normal. And I would just convince myself that I was still in control, and just, you know, all this justification, you know, I wasn't like, I didn't have morals or an idea of how, you know, I could be living. I could just never seem to reach those ideals. I could never seem to achieve that. And the things I said I would never do, just, you know, those goalposts shifted continuously, and I would make it right. I would just make it right in my head, and, you know, until finally in the end of, you know, God knows how many geographicals, how many lost jobs, how many lost relationships, how many, you know, beds I'd woken up in, not known, you know, how on earth I got there or who on earth they were, and just, you know, the other things that, you know, I would do for money. It was just like, I just snapped. Something had just like kind of broken in me, and I asked my parents for help. I asked if I could come home and return to Bournemouth. I was living in London at the time. You know, I was just living in the squalor of a bedroom because I couldn't leave my room. And like, you know, and they did. They said, that's fine, come home, you know, sort yourself out. And you know, and they took care of me, and they fed me, and, you know, and quite quickly I got a job again, and, you know, and I'd make all these promises that it was going to be different this time, and this time I'm going to be okay. This time it's all going to be all right, you know. And then very quickly, you know, all of those good intentions and all those things that I said I would, you know, start doing, like go to the gym and eat healthily, and, you know, take up hobbies, and, you know, maybe see a therapist again, you know, although I just used to lie to them. I'm just like, yeah, it's all my parents' fault, it's all my work's fault, all of this stuff, you know. And they would ask, do you drink and use? No. I'm just like, oh, you know, I had the odd glass of wine, that's what I'd, you know, say, and just absolutely just lie through my teeth. Because I was quite ashamed as well. I was really ashamed. I felt like a really weak person, you know. And then, you know, but quickly, you know, that boredom would set back in, and, you know, suddenly this, you know, that all that motivation I had would just begin to fade, and I'd just start to feel, you know, like the book talks about, you know, irritable, restless and discontent. And, you know, it was like a light bulb went off when I first heard those words. When I first heard that, it was so powerful, because I just thought, that is exactly how I feel all the time, you know. And yeah, it was just that light bulb moment. Irritable, restless and discontent. That would soon set in, and then, you know, before long I would just be back into my old habits and patterns. You know, I could abstain for about 5 days, I think, from drinking and using. That was my absolute max. Certainly with drink, you know, and I was a raving lunatic in that time. It really was, you know, and it was painful. And so that last year, I was really, really trying not to stop. I was really trying to control. I wasn't trying to stop because that seemed a bit much, you know. But I was trying to control. And it was like probably one of the most painful years because I couldn't. And it was like that, I just couldn't. There wasn't, you know, because an alcoholic and an addict of my type doesn't. You know, like that ability to control had gone. You know, and I didn't realise that, I didn't know that, because I didn't really know what I was. But it was, you know, the evidence was mounting more and more that, you know, I was completely out of control. You know, and then on those few occasions where I could, there was just absolutely, there were a few, like one or two, you know, I could have a civilised meal with someone and have a glass of wine and well, not have a glass, I'd have 2 glasses of wine, but I could stop at 2, you know, and that, but the effort that went into doing that just absolutely took away any enjoyment from, you know, what I was there doing in the first place, kind of thing. And, you know, once or twice I can do that. The rest of the times it was just like, yeah, not fun. Thank you. Oh, God. And then, yeah, I came into recovery. I found recovery because I was at a point where it was like I realised I couldn't control it, couldn't live with it, couldn't live without it. You know, it wasn't working either. You know, I still wanted to kill myself pretty much every day. And, you know, everyone had just had enough of me. Everyone was just absolutely sick to death of me. And they had kind of stopped caring as well. And that was really quite heartbreaking. They hadn't, but that's what it felt like, you know. They hadn't all stopped caring. They were just all hoping that, you know, I was going to finally, you know, pull myself together. And, you know, and a few weird things had happened, you know, in those last few weeks, like when the universe was sending me some messages, you know, I remember just seeing things about addiction and Russell Brand and, you know, like my mum was reading this book about, you know, a parent with children that are addicts and like, you know, kind of leaving it in my gaze, you know, so there were a few little signs about like, you know, maybe get some help. And so, you know, I just, you know, did what every millennial does and Googled a meeting. I had some awareness around, you know, the fellowship. I had been to one meeting to take someone else, a different fellowship, a year prior, and I remember sitting there listening to it all and like nodding and going, well done all with you, you know, doing really well. But, you know, a seed had been planted because I remember thinking like, well, I don't need this yet, you know, but there was that yet. And, you know, and it was like, I just remember thinking like, I'm going to go to this meeting or I'm going to go and jump off a cliff at Lulworth Cove. That was a bit dramatic like that. And, you know, and I remember sort of sitting in the car just like trying to weigh up these two ideas. I laugh at that now, but actually it was really bleak because I was deadly serious. Like it was either walk through that door or drive down there, and thank God I walked through the door. You know, thank God. And I was just met with these like happy, shiny faces. No, maybe not the shiny faces, but certainly shiny eyes. You know, lots of happy people, which was kind of terrifying because I wasn't. And but there was something there, and I could really feel it and sense it, and I could see it. I don't really remember what was said, other than get a sponsor and get a big book. That's all I heard: get a sponsor, get a big book. So I got a sponsor, and I didn't get a big book that night because I thought they were free, and they're not. So that was a blow. Can't pay for ourselves. Novel, you know. But I did get a sponsor that night, and she gave me some suggestions to do. We went for a coffee afterwards, and after that meeting, and I told her a little bit about myself, and you know, and she gave me some suggestions, and I remember sort of looking at them and like, you know, kind of scoffing and nearly handing them back to her and just saying a little bit more complex than that, like kind of, you know, prayer, and like what's a gratitude list, and you know, what's a just for today card. She gave me a just for today card, and you know, and she was kind of like, well, this is what we've got here, you know, and she was very plain speaking about it. This is what we've got, you know, do you want our help or not? you know, and I did want her help, you know, I needed her help. It was that, or I'm going to go and kill myself, you know. So yeah, I started trying out these bizarre suggestions that I didn't really believe in, but I remember really loving that Just for Today card. I remember really kind of thinking about the things on that, the suggestions on that, and thinking just how, you know, they still stick with me today. You know, they're so simple, but they're so helpful. You know, kind of do two things you don't want to do just for exercise. Like, I love that as a mantra, because I never did anything I didn't want to do. You know, I'd never even tried. I was just self-will all the way, you know, me. And like, that was such an important thing to practice, and still is, you know. It's really saved my arse a few times. And, you know, gradually we went through the big book, we read through it page by page, and we went through the steps, you know, and I had that awakening, you know, that's talked about. I had that change in personality. I had that change in my thought process. And I'd gone from being this, you know, selfish, self-centered, chaotic, you know, dishonest, liar, like, yeah, just, you know, this person to now, you know, this person that was trying, you know, I wasn't immediately, like, better, suddenly, like, really, you know, suddenly really honest and suddenly really, like, selfless. I wasn't. It took a lot of effort. I remember getting into work one day and just, like, one of the suggestions was, why don't you offer to make people some tea? Because I didn't do that. I'd just get my mug and go like that to the person that was walking past my desk, and everyone coming in, it's like, would anyone like a cup of tea? You know, and they were just looking at me like, is she all right? Because it was so alien. So, yeah, okay. You know, so I was trying to do little things like that, and it was those little things that have just built up over time. You know, making amends to my family, to my friends, to all. You know, I've made all my amends today. You know, everything that was on that original list, I've done. You know, to the best of my ability. There were 2 amends from people that I worked with in the past who yeah, they didn't want to know. So. You know, but I made the effort to do that, and who knows, maybe one day I'll get the opportunity. You know, that just kind of like being able to walk down the street with my head up and not be frightened, not live in fear, is just amazing. You know, and recovery hasn't always been a walk in the park. You know, life will show up, life does show up, it shows up for everyone. It doesn't just show up for addicts. You know, but I have, you know, the tools today to deal with those things, and I have done. And yeah, it's been hard at times, but just like, you know, every challenge I've had has just always been right before a great what I would call a growth spurt. You know, there's always been a lesson in it. There's always been like more revealed as to why something would happen. You know, even when it can feel really unfair and really like, oh, why me? Like, but why anyone? You know, and yeah, it's been a really beautiful journey. You know, it's had like, you know, if you told me 10 years ago I'd be sat here pregnant, like, you know, kind of just like in a job I love, you know, with, you know, a family that, like, yeah, you know, just all these amazing, beautiful blessings. I would never have believed you. You know, I would never ever have believed it. And, you know, but today you know, that is my reality, and it's amazing. I'm very, very grateful, very happy customer. You know, you know, recovery isn't for people who want it or need it, it's for those that do it. You know, the more you do, the more you put in, you know, service, home groups, sponsorship, all of that stuff. It's the same formula that you get given when you first come in, and it's the same thing I have to practice today. You know, and when I do that, life is good. I'm okay. I'm okay with life. I can cope with life. Things just work out because I'm not at war with everything. You know, and when I drop that stuff out, that's when it starts to feel difficult, you know. So I have to try and remember to have the same enthusiasm that I had when my arse was on fire when I first came in, you know. And when I do that, it's great. Anyway, I've rambled on forever, so I will leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Victoria.